So, let me now call on John Keane, Professor of Politics at the University of Sydney. A few years, many years ago, he held a postdoctoral fellowship at Cambridge, where he worked closely with Anthony Giddens, Quentin Skinner, and scholars and of many kinds. He arranged and edited Václav Havel's first book in English, The Power of the Powerless, in 1985. In 1989, he founded the world's first democracy research institute, the London-based Centre for the Study of Democracy. He later directed the Sydney Democracy Network, a network of researchers, activists, and policymakers concerned with the future of democracy. For over 2 decades, he was Distinguished Research Professor at the Wissenschaftszentrum Berlin, one of Europe's largest and most respected social science research institutions. And since so many published works dealing with different pieces of the democratic puzzle translated into some 30 languages, John Keane.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Sisters and brothers, citizenesses, as you were called in the 18th century, and citizens. I want to say that I'm really delighted, a bit terrified, and truly honored to be with you to contribute to this afternoon's gathering to commemorate the official opening of our federal parliament on this day 125 years ago. And to share with you 2 troublemaking, maybe outrageous thoughts about the matter of democracy, empire, and decolonization. First, as you probably know, the opening of Parliament was a strangely surreal imperial event. It was overseen by the son of King Edward VII, the Duke of Cornwall and York, who that morning of May the 9th had driven through Melbourne streets lined with cheering crowds. The crowd of 15,000 people were mostly comprised of well-heeled gentlemen, perfumed and behatted ladies. In the presence of the dreaded usher of the black rod, all of them were white. There were senators and House of Representatives elect bowing and bearing their "So God help me" oaths of allegiance to the recently appointed loyal Governor-General, the Scots-born aristocrat Lord Hopetoun. You could say that Lord Hopetoun's name was unfortunate because it turned out that this Governor-General was hopeless, a loser dogged by big spending habits, political blunders to do with the appointment of the first Prime Minister at Barton, which soon forced him to return to Blighty. And there was the highlight of this event, the formal address by the Duke, a royal known for his love of stamp collecting, animal hunting, and ruling his 6 children with a rod of iron. The Duke bigged up to the audience the local support for the Boer War, in which, as you may know, 1,000 Australian colonial troops surrendered their lives. He expressed the King's thankfulness, I'm quoting, and heartfelt satisfaction at the completion of that political union of which this Parliament is the embodiment. Trumpets sounded, a cabled message from the King was read out. The newly elected politicians then swore their allegiance to the empire. Our event is a good deal more tawdry and tattered, I would say. So, the launch of Parliament that we're commemorating was very much a colonial affair. But it had, I believe, a Jekyll and Hyde quality. It was equally an act of mental and institutional decolonization. It was the refusal, as Tsitsi Dangaremba, the Zimbabwean woman writer, puts it, is a characteristic of all empires and all colonial subjugation. It was a refusal of masochistic wallowing, The opening of Parliament, we could say, was only possible because of a long string of prior struggles for a straight-spined dignity. For instance, the formation of larrikin trade unions, the Eureka uprising, the overthrow of what Daniel Dennehy, an Irish lawyer, called the local bunyip aristocracy. The grand opening was the culmination of a string of firsts in the history of democracy, breakthroughs that included, for instance, the use of proportional representation for the first time in the world in Adelaide's 1804 local government elections, the early adoption of the adult male suffrage, 1856, the secret ballot, which is still known in various parts of the world as the Australian ballot, support de facto for Indigenous voting, referendums which endorsed a commonwealth, a commonweal, a res publica with power over old age pensions and interstate industrial disputes. It was a new federation for the common good based on the universal franchise that resulted in 1904, as you may know, in the election of the first national Labour government in the world, led by Chilean-born John Christian Watson. By global standards, the spirit of these world-first innovations was emphatically democratic, in my view. Yes, these world's first came stained with the blood and suffering of a near genocide of our Indigenous peoples. It was tainted by the forced exclusion of Asian, African, and Pacific Islander residents who were explicitly barred from voting, for instance, in Queensland and Western Australia. But the grand opening was undoubtedly infused with democratic sentiments that had been brewing for decades. It was not just a business deal among bickering racist colonial entrepreneurs who wanted a new free market customs union. The Commonwealth was thought to have the backing of God. It was typically a Protestant God. Some said it had destiny on its side. Inside the British Empire, its 3.5 million loyal white daughters and sons would become the equals of their white masters. The downtrodden, drovers' wives, bushmen, diggers alike would throw off their chains. Henry Parkes, the New South Wales Premier who opened the campaign for federation, you may know, summarised the spirit in a rhyming poem. God girdled our majestic isle with seas far-reaching east and west, that man might live beneath this smile in peace and freedom ever blessed. Yes, the champions of the new federal government were in two minds. They were possibly bipolar. Although they encouraged children of their country to wave the Union Jack in schools for the first time during this period, they thought of federation as an act of decolonisation. John Downer, a delegate from South Australia, said it like this: "Although I am an Australian, at heart I'm an Englishman." Samuel Griffith, the son of a Congregational minister, former Premier and Chief Justice of Queensland and Chief Draftsman of the Constitution, put things more bluntly. He said, "I am tired of being treated as a colonial." Second, sisters and brothers, a second thought. I'd like to turn, in conclusion, to our times to offer a less obvious and more outrageous thought. I think we're living through turbulent times in which our democracy's dependence upon a crumbling American empire requires us once again to do a second decolonisation of the spirit and substance of our democracy. I had expected booing. The American empire once played the role in my lifetime in building and securing the complex of global rules-based Bretton Woods institutions. Think of the Marshall Plan, in which some, mostly rich, white and privileged, so-named liberal democracies flourished. But I think Mark Carney is right. The writing is on the American wall. That era is over. Contrary to the saber-rattling bravado and bullshit of the Trump administration and its followers, the global grip of their empire is weakening. The United States loses every war, including this one on Iran. On virtually every measure, China is overtaking the United States. And as we see, when empires reach their endgame, it's a strong historical pattern. They're always paranoid, lawless, nasty, and bellicose. That's why outlier democracies such as Germany, France, Italy, Canada, Spain, Greece, Chile, Australia, and New Zealand are nowadays struggling to make sense of the decline of the American empire and the global rules it once enforced. They're being pushed this way and that by what's called the Kissinger rule. To be the enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be its friend is fatal. So my thought is that outlier democracies like Australia are being forced to adjust to a new reality of turbulence and confusion. They find themselves confronted by new questions about how, in self-defense, they can decolonize themselves, how they can lift their heads, straighten their spines to protect and nurture their own democratic institutions and ways of life against the shocks and confusion now gnawing away at their coherence, their morale, their stability, and future resilience. Sisters and brothers, to call for a decolonization of our government and our way of life has, I think, rich democratic implications. I have a long list of much-needed reforms which runs something like this. The rebuilding of a countrywide effective body for representing and defending the voices and interests of our Indigenous peoples. That we do not have such a body should be seen as scandalous. Breathing new life on my list is breathing new life into the old known Australasia. It still exists on some buildings to register the presence and the rights of millions of people whose multicultural roots and ways of living are shared with our wider region. Media reforms, breaking the grip of the Murdoch empire and its servile journalism. Strengthening the spirit and substance of public service media, new laws for the protection of public speech against injustice. On my list are bold legislative reforms, such as the regulation of lobbyists. I think there ought certainly to be a royal commission into the strangling effects of the Zionist lobby. Canadian-style new laws against the use of revolving doors by Scotty from marketing-type ex-politicians. And even the abolition of the power of the Governor-General, you may not know of it, to prorogue parliaments. Advancing new socially useful public investment strategies funded by taxes on the rich and redistributive policies which put a stop to the growing social inequality in a very wealthy country, in which the struggling bottom 20% of our population owns just 1% of national wealth. And in foreign policy terms, standing up to our American masters, admitting that we were wrong about Gaza, wrong about AUKUS, straightening our spines, not through fantasies of go-it-alone nationalism, Australia for Australians, but by taking the advantage of the breakdown of the American empire by renewing our commitments to the global rule of law, by nurturing a multiplex of new cross-border connections among cities, universities, small businesses, professional groups, governments, and NGOs like Amnesty and Médecins Sans Frontières. Citizens and citizenesses, if my list is too short or not to your taste, let's talk more. But in the spirit of reclaiming democracy, an ideal recall, which is much more than periodic elections and gathering in public assemblies. These examples underpin my hope is that we will say again and again, uncontrolled power is dangerous. America on the skids is trying to sow division and disunity to its advantage. Contrary to Mr. Miles, they can no longer politically be fully trusted or relied upon. That's why democracy, once again, for very different reasons than my grandparents supposed, is an indispensable global virtue, a non-negotiable basic requirement everywhere of a decent and dignified life for creatures large and small on an endangered planet we call home. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, John. John did warn me that he would have a few strong words to say about a particular subject. Thank you so much. And may I draw your attention, John has very recently had a new book published, 1st of May, I believe, Democrats and Despots, and you will see it on the screen. There are flyers on the literature tables. So you might be interested in purchasing a copy in the near future. I'm sure it'll be of great interest.